Hi, and welcome to the Marketing for Book Coaches podcast. This is the place to be for any book coach out there who's a little bit stuck with how to deal with marketing. In this podcast, we sit down with the best experts so that you can focus on what is most important, the marketing. My name is Anne, and I am your host. Today, our guest is a settler Dene researcher, writer, and editor consultant. Her main focus is helping writers publish culturally respectful stories by and about Indigenous peoples. She herself is a member of the Tseke Dene Nation and a founding member of the Indigenous Editors Association. Get your earbuds ready to be blown away by Rhonda Kronyk. Hi, Rhonda.
Hi, Anne. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast because we're having such an exciting topic, which is effective introduction letters to publishers. I was really excited to have that conversation with you because, as we're going to see, you are actually the expert in introduction letters for publishers. But we cannot talk about that without also having a talk about your niche. So how did you come to focus on niching as Indigenous editor for writers?
This is a great story. In 2017, I was given the incredible honor of being one of 9 Indigenous editors invited to attend the Indigenous Editors Circle that happened in Toronto, Canada that year. And that was the 3rd circle. And it was a different circle because that was the first time that non-Indigenous publishers had been invited. So there were publishing professionals along with the Indigenous editors learning side by side and separately, of course. We had different streams during that week. And that week of learning really did change my life. It was during that week that I began to understand even more deeply than I already did how many obstacles Indigenous authors face in getting their stories published in culturally respectful ways. And so soon after I finished there, I got back home and I started to look at my business, and I slowly began to shift to my niche work and in my current specialty, which is stories authored by Indigenous writers or with Indigenous content written by non-Indigenous writers. I began to speak publicly at conferences and webinars about the topic. And I guess during that point, I was doing a couple of things. I was helping to educate people, especially non-Indigenous editors, but I was also establishing my expertise because I did a lot of work in the background to make sure that I could do the best work possible. The shift was really slow, Anne. It took a long time. And there's a lot of mistakes I made along the way. Or maybe not mistakes so much as I wish I had the knowledge I have now and that I could redo some of those early jobs because I would do them so much differently than I did 7 years ago. But the shift was quite a bit beyond these surface level things, these visible things. I have pretty exacting standards, and I feel like my work has a heavy responsibility to Indigenous stories and storytellers. And so I felt like I had to know as much as I could to help Indigenous authors avoid those pitfalls that were established within the publishing industry. So I spent countless hours relearning Canada's history with Indigenous peoples because what I'd been taught in school was flat out wrong. It was a whitewashed version of history that didn't reflect reality. At the same time, I explored Indigenous peoples' lived experiences because those current lived experiences are influenced by past experiences and they reflect reality and they inform all of the books that I've been working on in these intervening years. So I spent a lot of time on social media watching what was happening in Indigenous communities. None of that learning has stopped. It's an ongoing process. But I really believe that it's what makes me good at my work because I bring that learning into virtually every job that I work on. It doesn't matter if I'm proofreading or book coaching or developmental editing, that knowledge comes in. And then as part of this transition, I spent a lot of time reading and learning Elements of Indigenous Style by Dr. Gregory Younging. And this book is a foundation of all of my work. So,
so if you listen to this or see, the link will be in the description, so you can find the book in the description.
And I strongly encourage everybody to buy this book. Even if you don't work in my field, I use the principles within the book for other voices that have traditionally been unrepresented or misrepresented in the industry. So yeah, I constantly learning is really how I made this tradition or this transition. And I keep speaking about editing Indigenous content, best industry practices, how book and magazine publishers can use the principles of equity, diversity, inclusion, and pluralism to uplift not only Indigenous voices, but the voices of all underrepresented groups, and to tell their stories in culturally authentic ways that heal rather than harm. So now, probably 80% of my work is with Indigenous content, whether it's Indigenous authored or non-Indigenous authored. And it's a wonderful, wonderful place to be, because there's so much happening in this particular niche that it's exciting to see the changes happening.
Yeah, I love how you say that for you it's an ongoing learning process, and that's also the beauty of finding your niche. It doesn't become something that you're like, I have it now, it's stuck there, I don't need to work on it. You continue working on it. And I think that's one of the reasons when you have found your niche, if it's an ongoing passion, your ongoing learning, because you're right, you're never done learning in your business. Just as a maybe a little, can you talk a little bit about your own Indigenous background? Because some listeners might ask, but why is she talking about this? But you actually have a very good reason to talk about this.
I do. I'm a member of the Tseke Dene Nation, which is in northern British Columbia. I don't live in my nation's territory, though. And I was raised in settler rather than Dene culture. It wasn't until I was in my mid-40s that I really sat down and began to learn what it meant to be Indigenous in Canada. And frankly, as wonderful as this country is, what I learned horrified me. And what I learned is what led me to apply to the Indigenous Editors Circle, because things have just been done so horribly. And so my personal learning is where I began this journey. And then it was the professional learning that has helped me continue it. So today, huge aspects of my life are informed by Indigenous ways of living and knowing, and it shows up throughout all of my work.
You're finding yourself back.
Yeah.
I love what you say also, that you feel you have that responsibility towards Indigenous storytellers, which brings us to what you use as very specific marketing method in your business, which are introduction letters. So can we maybe go back to why is it so important for you to really build up that relationship with publishers regarding to the Indigenous writers and their unique stories?
Yeah, for sure. This is really foundational to so much work with Indigenous peoples around the world. It's building relationships. Relationality it's foundational to my work. I can't do my work without building relationships.
And here. You have to build up relationships, whether it's with your clients, your competitors, your colleagues. Yes. You have to.
You really have to. And our work is often solitary. And so it's easy to forget that we need to do this. It's easy to forget that we need to be part of a larger community. Pardon me, I did not mute my phone, so I'm going to do that. Okay. We do need to be part of a larger community. For our own professional development, for one thing, that is how you learn, by interacting. But also because if you live in a bubble of isolation, you can't understand what is happening in your authors' lives, in the lives of the authors you work with. You can't understand what is happening in the wider historical context that might be informing what they're talking about or how they're writing. So building relationships is absolutely essential. One of the things that I did when I first started as an editor was to write letters of introduction by doing something that we tell authors to do. We, as editors, book coaches, we tell authors that before you choose an editor to submit to or an agent to try to work with, do your research.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I did when it came to selecting who to send letters of introduction to. I started with publishers that I met at the Indigenous Editors Circle, because I knew that they understood the problems the industry had with publishing culturally respectful stories. So they were my audience because they were already at least partway there. And then I started to watch what other publishers were publishing. And I started to approach publishers who were publishing stories by Indigenous authors and that appeared to have a good relationship, a good publisher-author relationship. And social media is a great way to learn some of this stuff. There's good hints on social media about which publishers and agents the authors you work with may want to approach. So I use that same approach for deciding who to send letters of introduction to. So I had a very carefully curated list. And my list was publishers that I didn't need to use space in my letter to convince them that publishing in Canada needed to change. They already understood this. My core audience knew the issues and they were working to address them. So all I had to do in my letters was to remind them of that to establish my expertise.
And what made you say, because I understand, of course, you have to build up relationship, but what made you say, let's reach out to publishers, let's build that relationship with those publishers?
A lot of it stems from my editing work. I became a book coach as a natural progression of being an editor and a teacher. I tend to teach. And so the book coaching, it came in a very organic way. And I had seen how well it worked as an editor. My success rate with letters of introduction with the niche work was phenomenal. From my perspective, at least, it was phenomenal. And so I decided that it would be a good idea to try it with other aspects of my business. And so by building up relationships, I already had people to talk to. And I realized that I could just simply expand what I was doing. And in doing so, I saved myself a whole lot of time and effort because I was able to simply transition my approach to aspects of my work that go beyond editing. I didn't have to start from scratch. And I was able to build on my reputation. And this has helped me with my clients. It's helped me help them find agents and publishers to work with.
So for you actually getting in contact with the publisher, yes, it was natural from because you did that as an editor, but it was also to really build up that reputation so that you could attract clients through the work with the publishers.
Yes.
Am I understanding that well?
Yeah, I'm very careful about where I invest my marketing time. I'm very careful about that because I only have so much of that. And so this approach has worked for me. And so that's where I've been investing my time.
Do you think this would work with someone who's a generalist editor, for example, or did it really work because you had that very specific focus?
Right. So one of the things that when I was, we're thinking about what we'd be talking about today, I was thinking about how my LOI, my letters of introduction, my LOIs had been working. And when I first started as a generalist, I heard back from about 10% of the publishers that I sent LOIs to. When I sent them out for my niche work, I heard back from about 50%.
Wow. So
that is a remarkable difference. I still think it is worth sending them out as a generalist, especially if you're early in your career, because that direct contact is a great way to start building a relationship.
Also because not many people do it. It is something that I advise to every single one of my book coaches. And not many people do it. They're a bit scared of building up that relationship, wondering if it's really useful. So It is definitely a way as well for you to stand out in your marketing.
It really is. And I've heard that from several publishers that they rarely get letters like what I sent them. And so that tells me it is something worth doing, even if you're not doing niche work. I think if you're doing niche work, you are going to have better success. At least that's my experience, the experience of people I've talked to. But that doesn't mean it's not worth doing if you're a generalist.
Especially when you're trying out. So that can be a... But again, I really like that you gave that very specific numbers because we all like numbers. But as a generalist, 10% of success rate, as a focused editor, 50%. So definitely worth the while to think about, one, your niching, and two, to get in contact with publishers.
Yes. The other thing is with the letters that focused on my niche work is not only did I hear back from so many more, but many of them sent me back emails that basically said, I am so happy to hear from you. I have several manuscripts coming up. What is your availability? Just like that. They didn't know that there were Indigenous editors. And so
but that is one of those issues, right? Some publishers don't even know that there are so specific book coaches and editors who have a specific focus like yours.
Yes. Yeah. And so you need to do what you can to educate publishers and agents really about the availability of these services.
I think we are all convinced now, Rhonda, that yes, we're a book coach, we're an editor, we have to write our introduction letter to the publisher. But what exactly is an introduction letter? What are the key components? How do you start writing one?
Okay. Key components of an introduction letter. Look, you're going to get different advice depending on who you talk to. So I'm only going to tell you my experiences and what I include in my letters. My very first piece of advice is to make the language simple and don't hide the important stuff. So the first sentence of my LOI has my name, the type of work I do, and my specialization. I just jump right into it. I don't waste time saying thank you for reading my letter. Straight into it. Publishers are busy people. So try to respect that and keep your letter of introduction as short and sweet as you can. Mine are about a page long. I will never go over a page. Your letter of introduction needs to include any specialized training you've done. Maybe you haven't done a lot. As an editor, I'm self-taught. I have done some professional development through the Indigenous Editors Association that I've got as part of my training section in my letter of introduction. I also talk about the need for my niche work, not why they should hire me specifically, but why they need to think about the fact that this niche work is necessary. Through that, they'll infer that they need to hire me specifically.
Well, because you're the easy way to go. You have the letter, you have the contact details. Why would you go look for someone else, right?
That's exactly right. So for me, when I talk about the need for my niche work, even though my core audience already understands that there's been issues that need to be addressed, I still briefly talk about issues in the publishing community that have led to so many culturally disrespectful stories being published.
And do you insert, for example, books that you say, oh my God, they could have really used an editor like me on that one? Or
I don't, but if I have a follow-up conversation, then that comes into it. But there's also no reason why you couldn't put it in your letter of introduction. The reason I don't is because my letter is full as it is.
So and also, again, that thing, time is precious for everyone.
Right.
We all hate having these really long emails without no end, with having everything what you've done in your life. So yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, I do try to really balance what's in it. Another thing that is in my LOI is my approach and what makes me unique. So, for example, a book coach could have a sentence something like, my approach to bookkeeping, to book coaching is grounded in, and then you talk about your values and your intentions and how you work with your clients. So you're giving them some insight into how you work, which gives them insight into how they can work with you. Make sure you establish your expertise. So I talk about the public speaking I do. I talk about the webinars and the conference presentations. I talk about the workshops that I do with magazine publishers. Establish your expertise outside of book coaching or editing, whatever it is that you're doing. So if you're book coaching, but your expertise includes naturally editing, talk about that.
When you say establish expertise outside of the book coaching, can that also be something completely not relevant to the editing, or you still think it's important to insert it in there?
I think so. For me, because of my niche work, and this is where niche work is different than generalist work in your LOI. I think this is a big place where it's different. When you're establishing your expertise, you also need to establish your knowledge level. And so, yes, I talk about my research into the historical and current realities of Indigenous peoples' lived experiences, because that's important. I talk about my knowledge of events that are happening in Canada, such as blockades and protests and mass graves at residential schools. I talk about these things because it's part of establishing my expertise.
So that's like a little paragraph.
Yeah.
Establishing expertise, but also that you're following like what is going on, that you really know the area in which you are working.
Yes. I think it's expertise can be more important than experience.
Yes, that absolutely. I think especially in your case, you're living it every day. So I think you don't need to have had like a 10-year editor's certificate. It is a very important element, which doesn't mean, I think, even if you're not an Indigenous peoples, would it be possible to be an editor and do the work you do?
Oh, this is such a tricky question. Okay. Actually, I like this question. This is a fun question for me because so I have a tendency to be fairly prescriptive, and I try to pull back from that. But in this case, I proudly embrace being prescriptive. Look, the reality is that, speaking from the Canadian experience, there are more manuscripts by and about Indigenous peoples being published than there are Indigenous authors to do the work. So at this point in time, sometimes non-Indigenous or Indigenous editors to do the work. I'm sorry. Sometimes non-Indigenous editors need to work on books. I also do not know how many Indigenous book coaches there are.
Not many. I recently had a writer who was looking for one, and it was a really struggle to find her a book coach who knew what we were talking about, but what she was talking about.
And that is a problem. The Indigenous Editors Association is working to build this network of Indigenous publishing professionals, but it takes time. So the reality is that non-Indigenous people are going to work on Indigenous projects. However, if there is any way to avoid that, the prescriptivist in me says, avoid it.
Yeah, I didn't want to like open a big debate. I was like, oh, the question came up before.
No,
but I think, it is also good that we have that question out there of like, yes, can someone like me who's not Indigenous do that work?
Yeah.
It would not, because I think there's just such a learning curve that for me would be very difficult to achieve. But it's always good to hear from someone who is in this situation and who knows, right?
And the reality is, you can do the work, but you won't be able to do it to the same level as someone with the background that I have. And that's a simple reality. It's not a judgment. It's just fact. You can't do it to the same level because you don't have that knowledge that informs my work. But that doesn't mean it can't be done. It really comes down to, again, building a relationship with the author you're working with and being open to taking some of your valuable time and learning some of what you need to learn in order to work with that author. However, there are jobs that I would say non-Indigenous people should not work on. And they're going to know that when they look at it and feel like they're in over their heads.
Yes.
In that case, then I really strongly encourage people, as difficult as it is, financially difficult, sometimes it's difficult because it's a job you might really like, you might be excited about. There are times when you need to be honest with yourself and say, I am not the person for this manuscript. I've done it with Indigenous manuscripts, Indigenous authored manuscripts. I have said, I'm not the person for this manuscript.
Yeah, exactly. And you say not only be honest with yourself, but also with your author, because at the end of the day, that's what you're aiming for, to have a great client service.
Yes.
And on top of that, those who listen to us, if you have this situation, now you have a name, you know who to target.
That's right. And I will give you more information later about who to contact. Yeah. And so, yes, non-Indigenous people can do the work. Not to the same level. And there are projects that are so heavily embedded in Indigenous cultures and traditions that they absolutely should not do those projects.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for giving your feedback on this one. So I'm going to try to get back the podcast to the introduction letters. I'm sorry, this question just came up. I'm like,
oh, it's great.
That's the thing. My podcasts are not scripted at all. So sometimes questions comes out and then we'll just put them in.
And it's an important question, Anne. I really think that's an important question that people need an honest answer to.
Yes, but that is true because, we hear that you can do it all. But when I saw really with this writer who was not Indigenous writer and she wanted to write about Indigenous character, I'm like, I cannot send you to just any book coach because this is something that has to be done by someone who really knows what we're talking about, because we're already starting with someone who doesn't live the situation and is writing about something she does know that really well. So
yes.
Thank you very much for that one, Rhonda. So we on the key components, so we had the simple, why there's need for this editing, my approach, expertise. Is there something else that you would add to the letter?
The only other thing that is always in my letters is the experience that I have in working with specific authors and publishers, especially authors that are well known. I've worked with some of Canada's best known authors, and so it makes sense for me to list their names.
Yes.
Same as publishers. So other than that, that is the components of my letter of introduction. But one of those things can be really hard, and that is the experience. So if you're new to this whole experience section in a letter of introduction, which if you go Google search how to write a letter of introduction, that's how I started. They all say include your experience, include your experience. If you're starting out, you may not have significant experience. So there's two options that I see. The first one, lean into the lack of experience. Be open about it. So there's a couple of ways you can do that. You can out and out say, although I'm new to the business, I bring with me a strong foundation in, and list all of your related experience. If you're an editor, that is really good experience for book coaches. I think editors make amazing book coaches. Another way you could do it is to say something like, while my experience in this role is recent, I'm deeply committed to, and then explain your passion for the work. You can go back to your values. For me, I'm deeply committed to helping Indigenous authors have their stories told in culturally respectful and authentic ways. So you're basically owning your lack of experience with that approach. And you're turning it into not a strength, because it can't be, but you're showing why it doesn't have to be a deficit.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I love the idea that you say just lean into it, because I see so many people putting up the fake testimonials, putting in fake experience. Just lean into it. I think as a client and as the writer, they prefer to have someone who's starting out, because someone who starts out is also lots more available and will always give more time than they should.
Yes.
So I think someone just lean into. I love working with people who start out in their areas, because I know they will give me the double of what I'm paying for.
Well, and it also, we go back to relationality. If you lean into it, you're being honest about it, you're being vulnerable about it, and you can build trust more easily.
I love that word, trust. It's so important, the trust. Yeah. That's the whole thing that you're building up in your business. It all comes back to that word, trust, right?
Yes, it absolutely does. There's another option if you don't have a lot of experience. Ignore the experience section and go back to something, a word I've used several times, and that's expertise. So I'm going to use a friend and colleague as an example. She has been doing a lot of work looking to see what's available for professional development opportunities for authors, book coaches, editors who work in the queer romance field. There is a dearth of opportunities and resources. And so she's recently transitioned into coaching queer romance writers. And her LOI focuses on the need for her work. And by focusing on the need for her work, she's showing that she understands the field. She's showing that she has expertise in this area. And so she's focusing on expertise rather than experience, because yes, she's coached a couple of authors and she does talk about that, but she makes her expertise the focus of the letter of introduction rather than her experience. The experience takes a smaller role in a letter like this. So you have two options. You ignore it. Don't lie about it. If you're found out, you break that trust. So don't lie about it. You ignore it, or you go all in.
I love that, Rhonda, because again, when you're being found out, especially as it's such a small community, that can be the end of your career as well. So
Yes.
thank you so much for reassuring also the starting editors and book coaches, because it's not easy to start out, but you've given a great opportunity for them to say, hey, reach out to the publishers. It's not because you're starting out that you are too small to reach out.
Yes.
Go for it.
Yes.
One last question. What are like the best practices, or at the country, the big mistakes besides the lying that we should avoid in a publishing, in an introduction letter to a publisher?
So I've mentioned them briefly. Best practices. I have 3 that I use in all of my communications. Keep the language straightforward and succinct. This is really hard for me because I like to ramble on. So
Don't we all?
Very aware. And sometimes I forget to review my letters or my emails before I click send. But keep your language straightforward and succinct. Keep your LOI to a page or less. It does not need to be a manifesto of your career. Keep it easy to use. Another thing that is really important that I think we forget about a lot as publishing professionals is to use your visual identity, your logo, your colors. Use this on all of your correspondence. So when I send out letters of introduction, they are not embedded in the email. The email itself simply says who I am, what I've sent them, and I send my LOI as an attachment that has my full visual branding and is set up to be very professional. This isn't something that you want to be casual about. I like casual conversations with people. Informal, I guess, is a better word. You don't need to be fully formal. You're not talking to the queen, but be business professional when you send these out. And I think if you do that, you're going to set yourself up for more success. Big mistakes. Yeah, the lying, I think, is your biggest potential mistake. Another one is not...
What's the line? Sorry, I'm not sure.
If you lie in your...
Oh, the lie. Yes, sorry. Yes, absolutely. There's no negotiation on this. Please don't lie.
That's number 1. But another one that I find is easy to do is, oh, great, ADHD just hit and I lost my train of thought.
Sorry, I interrupted you. That is also not helpful.
It happens. Oh, I know what it was. So I have a template that I use for my letters of introduction. And a fair bit of that template doesn't change from each time I send it out. You need to make your letters of introduction specific to the company you're sending it to, or the agent you're sending it to, or the author you're sending it to. Talk about what they've published that has you interested, or mention something that you saw on social media. Do not send a form letter out that doesn't change, because that is not how you build relationships. That's how you annoy people. Form letters are pretty easy to spot.
Yeah, it's like the ones written by ChatGPT as well. You can quickly see where it comes from.
Yes. Yeah, use your template, because again, time is precious. We can't spend 2 hours crafting every single letter of introduction. But you need to be able to spend 15 to 30 minutes on each one to make sure that it is specific to that recipient. So find that balance between time and, I guess, between not doing enough and doing too much is really what it is.
Yeah, but especially, I guess, once you have one good relationship with a publisher, it's just a ball that gets rolling, right? So it's definitely worth the while that you spend some time, of course, having that template. We have templates for everything, but really adapting and making it personalized to everyone, because we're the same. I hate to get forms. So you want to get something like personalized to you, that you say, oh, this person really knows about me.
Yeah. And here's how successful you can be if you build relationships. it has been about 4, maybe 5 years since I have done any marketing, because people come to me.
That, I think that is the one thing, Rhonda. You didn't do any, but nothing.
It's amazing. I occasionally send out another letter of introduction if I hear of a new publisher that wasn't on my list that looks really interesting, is working on something interesting. I will occasionally send out a letter of introduction. That's all I do. It is all word of mouth now, and those publishers that I've built relationships with.
I absolutely love that, Rhonda. That is just such perfect conclusion for this interview. Because yes, once you start up building that network, you're not going to be so reliant on having to have your clients through social network and get on that rat race that can sometimes be very, very exhausting. Thank you so much, Rhonda. That was really, really amazing. So in conclusion, let's just go back to what you said about introduction. Please feel free to interrupt me if you want. But number 1, create your list. Don't send out to just anyone. 2, keep it simple. That first sentence has to say it all about who you are and what you do. 3, give information about your specialized training. Number 4, your need for this kind of editing. Number 5, the expertise. So that can be your knowledge, your experience, or it can just simply be your passion and your values. Yes. Is that right, Rhonda? Did I get it right?
That's right.
So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Especially as you have something very exciting that is going to launch next year for any Indigenous editors who are interested in getting in this field.
Yes. So I'm a founding member of the Indigenous Editors Association. We were inaugurated at the end of the 2017 circle that I attended. And the IEA is a membership organization made up of publishing professionals and editors, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous, for our members. And we now have members. We've recently added categories for publishing professionals to be part of our membership. Unfortunately, right now, we only accept members from Canada and the United States. We don't know when that will change. We've actually just recently added the United States. And the IEA's vision is a storytelling community where editors, storytellers, publishing professionals are recognized and fairly compensated for their expertise, because we bring things to the table that other editors cannot possibly do. And so in spring 2025, if all things go through, of course, funding is always the most important part of anything like this. We will be holding our first Indigenous Editors Circle since 2017. And so we're so excited about this.
Yeah, I'm excited for you. I think it's such an amazing opportunity for people to learn more about what you do as well, because it's also building up that awareness, right? That if you're that kind of publishing specialist or expert, editor, book coach, whatever you do in the publishing world, to know that this exists, because you might need it at one point or another.
That's exactly right. And we'll have it'll be about 30 Indigenous editors and about 30 non-Indigenous publishing professionals will come together for the week. And so it's going to be a wonderful influx of knowledge into this really specialized field that we want to see expand greatly. So if you're interested in the Indigenous Editors Association, Anne has all of the links. And
I was going to say they were all in the description, so you can find all the information. And I would really strongly suggest you to attend. I'm sure it's going to be something amazing, as you already seen through the entire podcast. Because Rhonda, I really appreciate you put such a focus on helping others, even the younger editors who are beginnings, book coaches who are beginning. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Anne. This was a lot of fun.
Yes, it was, right? And that's a wrap for today's episode of Marketing for Book Coaches. If you enjoyed this chat and you want to have more of this tips, advice, podcast episode straight into your mailbox, don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. You will find the link as well in the description. Until the next time, and remember what Rhonda said, that a well-crafted introduction letter is really important to build up those relationships. She hasn't been doing any marketing out of it for the last 4 or 5 years because of these well-crafted introduction letters. Talk to you soon, and bye-bye.